Number 10. Jessica Jones. Jessica Jones, aka Jewel, but only for a very brief moment, is low on here because when she got pregnant she was still a private eye and keeping pretty distant from the superhero community. Jessica Jones debuted in Alias #1, the first comic for Marvel's then at the time new Marvel Max imprint. She had been a superheroine whose career was cut short after a disastrous encounter with the Purple Man, who after growing tired of her, sent her off to attack the Avengers, with emphasis on Daredevil. The Avengers proceeded to beat her into a coma, just assuming she'd gone full villain, and when she came out of it, she retired from superhero life. Alias is as much about Jessica's recovery as the mystery she is solving in it. She enters a relationship with Scott Lang, but ends up cheating on him with her close friend Luke Cage, and getting pregnant. Once Scott found out, he was upset, and he left her. But Jessica was in a good place. She had faced the Purple Man head on, escaped his control, and not killed him. That was a big deal for her in the comics. It made her feel like she was still a hero and still held justice above vengeance. Also, she was gonna get with Luke Cage, hooray! But yeah, pregnant, and later Squirrel Girl would be her and Luke's nanny. Good times. Number 9. Batgirl. We're talking about Barbara Gordon and the DCAU comic verse, so the DC Animated Universe Extended Comic Universe. Here we have to look at the Batman Beyond continuity, wherein the reader finally gets a glimpse into the falling out between Barbara, Dick, and Bruce. While Dick was away, Bruce and Barbara had, well, a fling. It's implied a bit more than that, but it resulted in her getting pregnant, and in a time frame that there is no way she could pass it off as Dick's. Ultimately, she would actually lose the baby after a particularly tough street fight. It would cause her to miscarry. It's a very grim and gritty plot that not everyone took to. It's very hard to be sympathetic to Bruce in it after it. Like, oof, this is worse than the rooftop in the animated Killing Joke adaptation, and that's saying a lot. Number 8. Selina Kyle. Selina Kyle, aka Catwoman, often skirts the line of antihero and thief, but her reforming is a common plot point, and her pregnancy pre-New 52 was part of her path towards trying to be a hero. This was an interesting nod to the past Huntress continuity, where the Huntress had been Bruce and Selina's daughter. The nod is that the baby here is named Helena Kyle, but she's not Batman's daughter, she's Sam Bradley's, but he dies the day Selina finds out that she's pregnant, so Bruce ends up being pretty supportive of this whole affair, but he ultimately helps Selina place Helena up for adoption when she feels that she can't keep her safe because of her life as Catwoman. She would then ask Zatanna to wipe her mind, but Zatanna would say no, which I find hilarious because I mean Identity Crisis, she was super cool to wipe minds, her friends, but not this time. This is the line. Number 7. Spoiler. Stephanie Brown. Her pregnancy storyline is famous. It occurred in 1998 and was praised for realism and the audacity to tackle such a topic in comics. This happened in Robin's comic series, the Robin in question being Tim Drake. At this point, Spoiler was an accepted vigilante in Gotham, but not on good enough terms with the Bat family to be in the inner circle, despite dating Tim. She would find out that she was pregnant with her ex-boyfriend's baby, and he was no longer in town. Despite not revealing himself, Tim would support her using an alias by taking her to Lamaze classes and the like. Stephanie decided to carry the child to term and give them up for adoption, somewhere hopefully away from Gotham for a better life. Intense stuff, people. The 90s weren't all shoulder guns and pouches. Number 6. Power Girl. So this was a plot that has slipped under the radar for some, also coming to us from the 90s, but not as well handled or poignant as Spoilers. Here we have Power Girl, who would be shown hooking up with Parallax, White, Reed Richards, Hair Streaks, Hal Jordan, and 2 issues later suddenly be in full-blown pregnancy symptoms, you know, the ones that happen in media. Dizzy, nauseous, food smells. And then all of a sudden she would blurt out mid-flight in a panel that definitely would have been memed if it had come out today, "I think I'm pregnant." You know, there's a reason people don't go around yelling this. There are many causes for nausea and dizziness, and you wouldn't yell those out. "I think I have the flu." So is Hal the father? No. This is one of those immaculate conceptions, and oh man, this plot goes places. Like then she's all, "I'm not pregnant," but that version of her was a robot, and the real version was pregnant. Then Hal was convinced she was lying to him about not being the dad, and so she punched him in the face, and he was all, "Let me be a dad," and she was all, "No, this is a virginal conception." Also, then her baby had powers from within the womb, so she could still kind of keep fighting. She ended up being sidelined during 0 Hour, but okay, who was the dad? It was Arion, and he impregnated her without her consent, so she would give birth to a perfect being. In what way is that better than it being Hal's? The baby would become Equinox, and where is he now? MIA. Number 5. TIGRA. TIGRA would find herself pregnant during the Initiative storyline when she entered into a relationship with Yellow Jacket Hank Pym. But she would discover she was pregnant after the Skrull invasion, where Hank had been revealed to be a Skrull. So she had to wonder, was it his baby or a Skrull baby? I mean, maybe it would be better if it was a Skrull baby. Hank has a lot of issues. TIGRA initially decided that she was going to abort the baby either way, but her cat-like physiology would allow her to carry the baby to term in 2 months. And so she would give birth to said cat baby, and the Skrull was the real father, by the way. I feel like Maury, this may be my favorite video. I have no idea what that says about me. The baby was named William, and TIGRA was initially very lukewarm about his entire existence. Also, since it's a Skrull baby, genetically it was still Hank's anyway, because that's the level of copying we're talking about here, people. She would warm up to William eventually. I mean, look at the little cat baby. And he would mature faster than your average baby as well. Number 4. QUASAR. Yes, QUASAR got pregnant, and he had a dramatic cover which said, "Mama never said there'd be days like this," which is a reference to a song which is from 1961. So it would already have been a bit out of date and left field as a reference when this came out, which was 1991. So QUASAR was impregnated by her, or Aisha, if we have to name her. She wanted to have perfect babies with him, or just someone. Really, she wanted to have babies with him, the him being Adam Warlock, but he was not down. So she was like, fine, I'll just inject heroes with my reproductive pods to see who's worthy. Not okay, people. Not okay. People and entities and forces need to stop doing this. It's not a good look. Of all the heroes she would forcefully inseminate, QUASAR is the only one who doesn't try to forcibly remove it, and it's kind of just like, okay, and keeps on fighting for her and everything. This was largely played for comedy, which I don't know, is that better or worse than just not knowing why it's squicky? Having your body violated against your consent. Hilarious. But he got the same homage Demi Moore cover as the She-Hulk did, so worth it? Number 3. Spider-Woman Jessica Drew. Jessica Drew's pregnancy was a huge plot point for her. She would continue to fight crime throughout while pregnant, but she would have a special force field belt for her stomach, so it's fine. Sure, Jan. There would be a whole who's the dad question here as well, and the answer is some guy. She would artificially inseminate herself because she wanted to be a mom. This was a shift for her character, as initially she had seemed to imply that she wasn't interested in motherhood. But people change, things happen. Her whole pregnancy would be all about how, yeah, she could do it all, which, okay, yes, nice, mom power. As someone who has been pregnant, even if your pregnancy is amazing, you still can't do it all. And that's not a bad thing or a weakness, just a reality. There's another person in there. Her taking time off wouldn't have made her less of a hero, and implying that it would have, well, okay. So after having the baby, she would suffer from separation anxiety and wrestle with going back to being Spider-Woman at all. But then she would decide that she would, so she could be a good example. Number 2, Ms. Marvel. Yes, this is number 2, shock and awe. So this storyline is infamous at this point. Miss Marvel would find herself impregnated against her will by her lover, who had altered her mind to make her want him, so rape, so that he could give birth to himself. This occurred in Avengers 200. Now some have come out after all of the hail of criticisms against this comic being like, it's not that bad, but here's the thing, no one in the story reacts normally here. Her teammates are congratulating her, like, what? No, she has no idea how this happened or why, and she's terrified, and they're like, yeah! Also, it's a scary hyper pregnancy, and then the baby hyper ages and becomes her lover, and then she goes off with him and they accept it. And yet, no one questions her about it. This is probably just writer oversight, like no one thought about the implications because perhaps they were outside of their viewpoints or own experiences, which doesn't have to be an issue, but can be if the writer doesn't even think to acknowledge it. So later, she would come back and yell at the team after fan backlash. Some were like, see, it's fine. But this was a retcon only after people complained. Her being mind controlled to give birth to the man who raped her. Totally fine. Number 1, the Invisible Woman. Yes, she's over Miss Marvel. Sue Storm, the Invisible Woman, would be the first woman to become a mom and superhero in comics, so an iconic pregnancy. She would take a break and then come back, like life. Her second pregnancy would be very dramatic, however. In fact, the first time it would not come to fruition and the baby would die because of Sue's exposure to radiation in the negative zone. It was a really sad plotline, in fact, for some fans, too sad, and it would be retconned very convolutedly, so get excited. This pregnancy would be saved by Franklin Richards and his terrifying godlike powers. He would place the baby in an alternate future timeline, where after encountering a Marvel girl from another timeline where she is the daughter of Sue and Doom, she would be reverted to a baby and replaced in the womb of Sue, but allegedly be the original stillborn baby, who Dr. Doom would then help Sue give birth to and name Valeria, the same name that Marvel Girl had in that alternate timeline. The point is, she would have the baby. Hooray! Sue does it all, but with the realism that at times that means making sacrifices and finding a balance, and that's why she takes the #1 spot. Number 10. Black Canary. We're starting things off in the Injustice universe. This universe was spawned from the fighting game tie-in comic. So in it, the heroes are divided after Superman begins his dystopian push as he sets up the One Earth regime, a world government, helmed by Superman and those who agree with him, while those who oppose this are set up as part of an underground rebellion. Of the heroes who oppose him, you of course have who you would expect: Batman, and also Green Arrow, Batman Light, and Black Canary. Don't yell at me, it's fine, it's true, it's fine. When hanging out in the Arrow Cave, Harley Quinn, who at this point has had a change of heart and is helping Green Arrow by doing things like renaming his Arrow Cave the Quiver, gets into a fight with Black Canary. And the two are fighting quite intensely until Black Canary suddenly doubles over asking for a bucket, because fictional pregnancies are usually far more dramatic than real ones. Fun fact, for a lot of women, if you are experiencing morning sickness which leads to vomiting, which not all women do, it usually happens at the same time each day, so you can kind of plan your life accordingly. It's also not always in the morning. Just life facts for the comic I'll never write, featuring a realistic boring pregnancy. So she gets the bucket, throws up in it, and Harley figures out that she's pregnant, and the two bond over it, for Harley has been pregnant in this universe as well. Harley would go on to babysit their child and be a great friend to their family. Number 9. HAWKGIRL, DCAU. This is an implied pregnancy. Still counts. So in the DC animated universe, HAWKGIRL and Green Lantern John Stewart had a deep relationship. It was a huge part of their arcs. The build up to it took seasons and was a huge final moment, and also the moment when her helmet was taken off and she was revealed to be gorgeous. I've never recovered. However, their love was shattered when she was revealed to be a traitor, a scout for the Thanagarian invasion force. That puts a damper on any relationship, even if she would defect to save her new friends. For some, that just made her a traitor twice over. But her and John still clearly had feelings for each other, and in a Batman Beyond episode, it was hinted that they would have a child. This was also hinted in a time travel episode in Justice League Unlimited. This is because Warhawk of that team in the future was their son, but he didn't reveal anything when he went back in time because he didn't want to mess with it, even if it meant he didn't exist. You see? That's how you time travel. Number 8. Superwoman. Reach, reach, reach. She's super low, pun intended, because well, she is from Earth 3, the crime syndicate Earth, where the heroes are villains, etc. However, they don't see it that way. She would play a pivotal role in the Darkseid War arc, or rather her pregnancy and baby would. So on her Earth, she is with Ultraman, but was also having an affair with Alexander Luthor, the hero of that world. She was also cheating on both of them with Owlman too. So when she first got pregnant, she told Ultraman it was his, but then told Owlman it was his, when really it was Mazza's, who is Alexander Luthor, who has the ability to absorb powers of the people he has killed, such as Billy, or on this Earth, William Batson, hence his name, Mazza's, which is Shazam backwards. So essentially what happened was she gave birth to the new Darkseid. This is because the baby had its father's abilities to absorb power, so was made to absorb the Omega effect and the anti-life equation. Then she died and was killed. How was this heroic? Well, this would end the war, alongside some coinciding actions. Look, they think they're heroes and they're mauled after them. You're glad you know. Come on. Number 7. Artemis. Kinda. We gotta put it down here because people have been baiting the net with clips for a while. We're going to be looking at Young Justice for this number. So at the end of season 2 of Young Justice, Wally West was gone, and it was tragic for fans, especially as him and Artemis were a favorite couple. And what with Wally being gone from the New 52, it was all too much for some people. There was even a hashtag for a bit, Justice for Wally. It was an experience. Then Young Justice was cancelled, which was devastating for some fans, as it had ended on a bit of a cliffhanger for certain characters, like Wally. So fans started petitions and made noise, and eventually years later got the series back. Season 3 did finally bring some closure to Wally, but not entirely. However, it did provide a future vision or ideal version of the world for Artemis, and it involved her and Wally together with a baby. She was down to be pregnant with Wally's baby. Stop breaking our hearts, Young Justice. Many people felt a bit more lukewarm about season 3 though. Thoughts and feelings, questions, concerns? Share down below. Number 6. Bumblebee. Speaking of Young Justice, we have a more than fantasy birth here with Karen Beecher aka Bumblebee and Mal or Guardian, for a time anyway. Her and Mal were high school sweethearts who hit a bit of a rough patch when she got really invested in her work and kinda took him for granted for a bit, but they got over it. So when she was pregnant, the series used it to dive into a series of tough questions about whether or not their child would be gifted with a meta gene. So if she would have this gene or not, what would it mean, and did they want her to or not? Both eventualities had pros and cons. Karen would give birth in a snowstorm, only for it to be revealed that their daughter had been born with a hole in her heart, which despite just giving birth, Karen shrinks down to fix herself, all while contemplating the nature of her tech-based abilities versus meta ones. It's an interesting discussion and a deep one, something that Young Justice enjoys doing. Number 5. Wonder Woman. So Wonder Woman got pregnant by Superman. It's happened a few times actually in Elseworld or alternate universe continuity stories. We of course have the sequel to The Dark Knight Returns, The Dark Knight Strikes Again. In this we have the now infamously memed panel where her and Clark have sex up in the sky, so hard the earth shakes, and at the end of it Diana announces, "Wow Clark, I'm pregnant again." Quality content. However, there is a less, well, awkward pregnancy in Kingdom, which is the sequel to Kingdom Come, which is a famous Elseworld story featuring an older crop of heroes led by Superman, who have to return to deal with new younger meta heroes who are out of control. At the end of that comic, these two, Superman and Wonder Woman, would get together, and in the sequel comic she would give birth to a son who of course they named Jonathan. That's Clark's go-to name, because in so many continuities his dad is dead. In most of them by accident. There's also this panel of Wonder Woman being terrified of being pregnant by Clark in the New 52, and of course it's been cut out and used in some epic thumbs, maybe even in ours. I don't know, I won't know till later. Living life on the edge. Number 4. Venom. Now you could kind of consider the symbiote pregnant when it spawns, but we're going to be looking at a specific instance. And no, it's not Carnage, a more recent iteration. We're going to be looking instead at Mike Costa's run, which had Eddie Brock become pregnant with Venom's baby. Yes, this was an extremely shippy run, and Donny Cates, who had come in after, hated it and made fun of shippers and is now just super aggressive to fans in general. Sad times at Twitter Hive. Eddie didn't know what was happening at first. Here he was, having weird dreams and of course throwing up, and Venom was all, "Nah, don't worry about it, it's all fine." Venom needed the bond this time to be able to spawn, and once Eddie found out, he was super protective of it. And he was keen to make sure the new symbiote was spawned safely. Now everybody was hunting Eddie down, saying this new child was a threat. I mean, look at all the other symbiotes that have been created because of Venom and then the spawn of Venom. But it all seemed to be for nothing as the symbiote was stillborn. But psych, that wasn't true. It lived and has been growing, kidnapped at first by its host. The true child of Venom was meant to be raised up into a hero. They say true. That's why I kind of said it like there were quotes around it. True. Number 3. The Scarlet Witch. Ah, the tale of the Scarlet Witch's children. As much a canonical one as a tale of how some writers on staff hated her and the Vision together. Now Wanda was married to the Vision, who is a synthezoid. So how did this happen? Magic. Yes, they said it was magic. A magical pregnancy. So we would get to have all those traditional pregnant panels with her and Vision, and also get to have the concept that they were his kids. Now later, these kids would be retconned out of existence, only to be retconned back in. Her being pregnant was a big plot point. The whole relationship was. It was all planned out, and as a result, some on staff just got sick of it, especially if they had only been lukewarm on the idea in the first place. The realization that her children had been a manifestation of her own powers would greatly degrade Wanda's mental state, and she would later have a breakdown of epic proportions, first creating the House of M universe and then nearly wiping out all mutants. Later there would be a Lost Children arc, where Wiccan and Speed would believe themselves to be her lost, displaced children and seek her out. And they were indeed Vision's children. Just why? It didn't have to be like this. Number 2. Donna Troy. Donna Troy, aka Wonder Girl, aka Troya, aka Darkstar, aka Leave Her Origin Alone. At one point she was married to a man named Terry Long. Terry was a married college professor who met and fell in love with Donna, leaving his wife, well, ex-wife, and child for her. Thus would begin a whole Donna balancing being a hero and a normal life arc. Donna would become pregnant quickly, and then a group of Teen Titans would come from the future to kill her baby. This was because he was gonna grow up to become a villain called Lord Chaos. Yup. But Lord Chaos also came back to make sure that his mom gave birth to him, and she did, and named the baby Robert. And at that point the writers seemed to realize, oh no, they'd written themselves into a corner of sorts. So Donna would leave her life as a superhero to raise Robert, but would eventually be lured back in after a series of supervillain attacks. This would drive a wedge between her and her husband, so he would decide to take the baby and leave, and the two would end up getting divorced. But this was another problem. Divorce wasn't that acceptable at the time. A divorced hero? Who could relate to that? Asked the late 80s. And so they fixed it by having him and the baby and the wife all die in a car crash. Isn't that better than her having to deal with the reality many people live of blended families? The 80s thought so. Number 1. ELASTIGIRL. That's right, time to look outside of Marvel and DC to the movie The Incredibles and the awesome hero and mom ELASTIGIRL, who had 3 kids with Mr. Incredible, and who the internet feels is dummy thick. Dem thighs, that's what they say. Her and Mr. Incredible met at the height of their superhero careers, and it was only shortly after that superheroes would be outlawed because of the lawsuits and the payouts they were causing the city. Helen Parr would at first be more accepting of the changes in their lives, settling into suburbia, but she too would feel the lure of their former heroic life, a lure that would be even more pronounced in the Incredible sequel. While the first film explored her husband's struggles, but still dealt with what she was dealing with too. It's a very honest look at middle age and deciding to accept your life or change it. I don't know, I love The Incredibles. Number 10. Starfire. I know some of you have been yelling, where is Starfire? We're working our way up to it. Today we're going to be looking at the Starfire from the alternate universe situated in Kingdom Come, the same one where Wonder Woman and Superman got together. I saw your puns for that too, I see you. Kingdom Come is of course the 1996 miniseries that dealt with a future crop of heroes needing to be reined in by Superman, after some of them end up getting out of control. In this universe, Starfire and Nightwing ended up staying together and having a child, Nightstar, and I'm sorry to say that at the start she was one of the heroes who was out of control. As many of the villains have been dispatched, a lot of the heroes are just fighting each other, kinda killing time. However, she ends up seeing that they are going too far and there's just a lot of collateral damage, and finds herself swayed by the mindset of the older heroes. But instead of joining Superman, she joins up with her grandfather, Batman, as a member of his new Outsiders team, which is made up of many new generation heroes. Number 9. Golden Age Black Canary. There were some interesting things that happened in between the Golden and Silver Ages, and one of those things is that the Golden Age Black Canary is the mother of the Silver Age one, and they both hailed originally from Earth 2. Earth 2 is the first parallel Earth, the cornerstone of the multiverse. The Flash of Two Worlds is the first story of the multiverse that would establish that this Earth was moving in tandem with the Silver Age, but further forward in time. So heroes had emerged earlier on the Golden Age Earth, as they had in real life. It was a little meta. As a result, this Earth was producing legacy characters, and Black Canary was one Dina Drake Lance, and she fought crime alongside her detective husband, Larry Lance. The two would have a daughter, Dina Laurel Lance, who would join the JSA, and eventually would make her way over to Earth 1, that being the main Earth engaged in the Silver Age. This was to be with Oliver Queen, Green Arrow. These two Earths would cross over enough that some of the characters on them were friends, and in this case, love interests. I mean, would you just leave your Earth for Mr. I was trapped on an island? Let me know down below. Number 8. Crystal and Quicksilver. Crystal is a member of the Inhumans, a princess who, like all Inhumans, developed her abilities after being exposed to the Terrigen Mist. She is the sister of Medusa, queen of the Inhumans, and as a result also has amazing hair. She would end up developing a romance and deep love with Quicksilver, the twin of Wanda Maximoff and former son of Magneto, cause you know, retcons. Horrible retcons. She would be featured alongside him often. In this period in Marvel history, there was a lot of build-up put into the romances, spanning multiple books and years. The editors wanted them to be very firmly established. She would eventually marry Quicksilver and have a daughter with him named Luna. However, their relationship would suffer when she had an affair with Scarlet Witch and Vision's next-door neighbor, some guy named Joe, allegedly because Pietro was mistreating her. But it's okay, this was all mind control. Makes it better? Luna would remain a character and has had plots all her own, like being forcibly exposed to Terrigen Mist. Number 7. Jean Grey. Hopping timelines once more to look at Jean Grey in the Days of Future Past storyline, not Madeline when she had Cable. I know they're clones, but they're different people. Clone rights for all clones. Marvel really needs that. So this all occurs on Earth 811, and Rachel, the daughter of Jean Grey, would be kidnapped and brainwashed, and she would be turned into the Hound, a mutant who hunts down other mutants. As in this future, the Mutant Registration Act had turned dystopian after the assassination of Senator Robert Kelly. Well, more dystopian. For a time, she would remain under Ahab's control, that being the people who kidnapped her, but her psychic power would link her with her victims, which would break the control they had over her. Some interesting things then happened, like her being displaced and sent to the main timeline, where she learned that there her mom was dead, and that her dad was married to someone who looked just like her mom and was having a baby with her. It was all a bit of a shock, because she was like, oh no, I was the firstborn, me, then Nate. Because she's Nate Gray's sister. Number 6. Silk Spectre. Now it's time to look at The Watchmen, the famed superhero deconstruction by Alan Moore, and it has become a must-read for comic and graphic novel fans. Here we have the equivalent of a Golden Age hero in Silk Spectre, a hero in it largely for the glory, the fame, and to further her career goals. Years later, she would settle down and have a child named Lori, who she would manage and push in a very stage mommy style way to become Silk Spectre 2 and carry on her legacy. One of the interesting things here is who Lori's father is. Back in the heyday of superhero teams, her mother had nearly been raped by nihilistic dark antihero The Comedian, but had been saved. However, years later, the two had gotten together consensually, at some point, and Lori had been conceived. It's such a fascinating and raw thing, and something that sometimes happens because life is complicated, not black and white. That's one of the great things about The Watchmen, the nuance, and how it treats you as intelligent by giving you the breathing room to decide how you feel about things. It's something that makes it unique. Not many works have the confidence to do that. Just stand there and be like, interpret me. Too many people are worried people will interpret it wrong. Which, I mean, maybe he should have been a little concerned given some of the spin-offs. I see you, HBO. Silk Spectre, superhero, stage mom. Number 5, Kitty Pryde, the Brood. Ah yes, the famous thumbnail for part 2. No, it was not a scene from a long-lost hentai, but rather a plot arc, wherein some X-Men were impregnated by the Brood. In this case, we're looking at Kitty. The Brood are an insectoid species in the Marvel-verse, who must lay their eggs inside hosts to breed, and they love the terror that brings out in their hosts. They're a very sadistic species. As if everything eventually is allowed to follow through gestation, the host will become Brood, aware the whole time the transformation is taking place. So let's talk Kitty. Kitty broke up with Colossus and returned to Charles's dream alongside Wolverine to open up the Jean Grey School for Higher Learning. Then, 4 issues into Wolverine and the X-Men, she wakes up pregnant. Like, big pregnant, like a sim. However, instead of just blindly congratulating her because they're not the Avengers, the X-Men spring into action, because that's not normal, or okay. And they quickly figure out that this is a Brood infestation, and so they are able to halt the transformation and abort the Brood egg. It involves a lot of pregnant Kitty running around her underwear. I've seen the fan art, so for those of you who, well, you're welcome. You know who you are. Number 4, Witchblade. So, the Witchblade, Cliff Notes version, is a sentient gauntlet empowered by the forces of light, Angelus, in the universe. It hops from host to host, locked in an eternal battle with the darkness, the embodiment of, well, darkness and nothing, who also travels via host, always male, while the Witchblade is a bit more flexible. Before a time they had a male-female thing going on, which resulted in the first host, Sarah Prezi, being impregnated by the darkness's host, Jackie Estacado. This happened while Sarah was in a coma, and he did it to try and sway the balance and influence the Witchblade. The darkness has a weird love-hate relationship with the forces of light, Angelus, yeah. And sometimes it leads to impregnating ladies in comas. Here's the thing, before you go full squick, neither of them knew this at the time. Better? Sarah would give birth to a daughter named Hope, and her life would be saved by the Witchblade when she experienced complications with the pregnancy. Number 3, Rocket from DC. Rocket, the DC version, Rachel, was a sidekick to the character Icon and hailed from a very crime-ridden area. However, shortly after she began her adventures as a superhero, she discovered she was pregnant by her ex-boyfriend. She decided that she would have the baby and give birth to a son, Amistad Augustus Irvin, hence making her a teen mom, and it was handled very tastefully. After a period away, Rachel would return to her adventures as Rocket and find a way to balance both. She's a character who kind of fell by the wayside, but those who remember her do so fondly. Number 2, Adam Eve. Adam Eve comes to us from Robert Kirkman's Invincible comic series. Adam Eve was created to be a weapon, and yet turned out to be a very nice teenage girl and eventually woman, even with her extreme intelligence and powers. After having a crush on the lead hero Invincible for years, the two would eventually get together, and she would find herself pregnant and not be thrilled, as Mark, Invincible, was spending so many long periods of time in space. She would eventually have the baby, and well, Invincible it's a complicated comic. Kirkman lets the plot go where he wants, so a lot of things will just happen. Parallel dimensions, timeline skips, everything. Sometimes plots are dropped, never to return to or return to years later, but the relationship between Eve and Mark for some is an anchor, and many were happy to see them start a family together. Number 1, SIRYN and Jamie Madrox. So Jamie Madrox is the Multiple Man, a mutant who can create duplicates of himself, and over the years the nature of these duplicates has been explored. So one night, Jamie split himself into 2, and when he woke up he discovered that he and his dupe, as they are called, had had sex with SIRYN and Monet separately, and neither was aware that he had split, and thought they had full Jamie. And Jamie didn't remember much because he had gotten blackout drunk. SIRYN, who most often hangs out with the X-Men, ended up pregnant during this night of passion, and she decides to keep it, and her and Jamie decide to give it a go. And for a while, it all seems okay. She goes into labor, he proposes to her while it's happening, cause timing, what's that? But then things start to go wrong. They need to do an emergency C-section, the baby is blue, not breathing properly. But after drama, a near kidnap plot and everything, it all seems okay. SIRYN held her baby, named him after her dead father, and then passed him to Jamie. And then it all goes horribly wrong, I'll never recover. The baby started being reabsorbed into his body. He had gotten his facts wrong. He had slept with Monet and his copy had been with SIRYN, hence the baby was a copy, not real, it was a part of him. And so when he touched it, he reabsorbed it, erasing the baby from existence. As you can imagine, that was a relationship ender. My heart.